not the literal history like yung subject ha. Yung history, it is not just something to learn. But we have to we have to, kumbaga, dapat magkaroon tayo ng realization from our history. We all know the power or the great power of history. So, from the fact that we hold it inside us, and yung memory, it controls us. So, we are unconsciously controlled by our memory in many respects. Hindi man natin napapansin, hindi man tayo aware, but most of our actions today ay bunga or dahilan na nangyari sa atin noong nakaraan. So, history or the past is actually present in everything we do. So, without the memory, it could be hard for us. Kasi, given the fact that sa pamamagitan ng memory, or dahil sa memory, meron tayong tinatawag na frame of reference, meron tayong personality, and meron tayong ambition in the future. So, nakalagay din dyan, it focuses our attention on the imagination of events rather than on events taken literally. So, it concentrates our attention on the imaginative interpretation of events. Diba sabi ko nga kanina, yung history or yung memory, it is not just something to learn. Kailangan merong realization dito. Hindi natin kailangan i-take literally yung mga event or yung mga experience. We have to concentrate, we have to focus our attention on the imaginative interpretation of our experiences. And nakalagay din dyan, memory is a kind of poetry. Memory is a poetic form. Saan ba nanggagaling yung poetry? Or where does poetry come from? Paano ba tayo nakakagawa ng paano ba tayo nakakapag-compose na isang magandang tula?
Diba? Sa imagination po natin.
Okay, very good. Kailangan na imagination. It comes from the imagination. So, just like, katulad ng isang tula, yung memory, it is like, a kind of, literature na nag-require ng imagination. So, we don't have to take our experiences literally. And, ayun, katulad nga rin na sinabi ko kanina, hindi tayo dapat nagkukulong sa nangyari sa atin sa nakaraan. So, let us try to analyze, let us try to, kailangan magkaroon ng realization, paano ba yung nangyari sa akin sa nakaraan, paano ito makaka-apekto, and much better, yung question is, paano ito makakatulong sa akin sa kasalukuyan para mas maging better ako in the future or mas maging better ako compare sa past. Ayun. So let us proceed to our module discussion. And as mentioned in the previous module, cognitive psychologists generally organize the main processes of memory according to 3 common operations. So, andito na naman muli si encoding, storage, and retrieval. So, napansin ko lang sa exam, maraming nalito siguro. If I am not mistaken, the question is, all of the following describes level of processing framework. So, i-identify ninyo yung exemption. Parang ganun yung thought ng question eh. Tapos yung tamang sagot doon is yung level of processing framework ay nagpo-focus sa storing rather than the encoding process. So, marami nagsagot na ang focus ng level of processing framework ay nasa encoding, hindi sa storing. And meron din nagtanong or meron din message sa akin na parang parehas lang naman daw yung encoding and storing. So, hindi sila parehas. It is, di ba, itong tatlo na to ay mga proseso. So, it is sequential process. Kumbaga, magmumula muna sa encoding, sunod yung storing or storage, then retrieval. So, when we say encoding, It refers to how you transform a physical, sensory input into a representation that can be placed into memory. So, when we say encoding, ang tatandaan yung word dito ay yung transforming. Ano ba yung tinatransform? Encoding is the process of transforming a real sensory input into a representation or mental representation that can be stored in memory. Yun yung tinatawag nating encoding. Like sa computer, di ba? Meron tayo minsan nakikita ng mga advertisement or yung tawag dito yung naghahanap ng yung mga job advertisement like wanted encoder. When we say encoder or when we say someone is an encoder, ano ba yung ginagawa ng tao na yun? Di ba ang ginagawa ng tao na yun ay mag-type, mag-encode, i-encode yung information. Ang kaharap niya, computer. Then, either meron siyang tinatype na material or document or what. So, when we say encoding, kung i-relate natin sa computer, it is the typing or encoding of information. So, doon nag-i-stop yung process na yon. Ngayon, saan mapupunta yung in-encode na information? Halimbawa kayo, ginagawa ninyo yung research ninyo, ini-encode ninyo yung research ninyo or yung information na yon doon sa, halimbawa, sa MS Word. So, encoding yon. Ngayon, isi-save nyo na yung ginawa ninyo. Then, yun yung tinatawag natin na storage process. Saan mapupunta yung in-encode na information? Because the encoded information should be stored. Magkaiba yung proseso ng encoding sa keeping or holding of information. It is a sequence. It is a sequential process. The information being stored can be retrieved later on. So, kapag meron kang in-encode, obviously, you have to save kung ano yung in-encode mo, then yun yung tinatawag na storage. Then yung storage, it refers to how you keep your encoded information in memory so that the information being stored can be used or can be retrieved later on kapag kinakailangan na or kapag kailangan nang gamitin yung memory na yon. So again, I would like to reiterate, encoding happens when the senses are stimulated and those senses are decoded by specific areas of the brain. So kung ang information na yon na transform ay na-manipulate, ginamitan halimbawa ng mga strategy or technique para ma-keep yung information na yon, then that is storage. Then, bakit ba natin kailangan i-keep or i-hold yung information? Obviously, kailangan natin i-save or i-hold yung information because mahalaga yon or kinakailangan natin yon. And magagamit natin yon sa mga instances or sa mga instance or circumstance na kinakailangan natin yung particular memory natin sa event or experience na yon. So, ayan, encoding, storage, and retrieval often are viewed as sequential stages. You first take in the information, then you hold it for a while, later you pull it out. So, the processes, however, interact with each other and are interdependent. So, encoding and transfer of information. Before the information can be stored in memory, it first needs to be encoded for storage. So, basically, ayun nga, ano yung i-store mo or ano yung i-keep mo kung wala kang in-encode. Kailangan mo na ma-encode yung information para mangyari yung proseso ng storage. So, even if the information is held in our short-term memory, it is not always transferred to our long-term memory. Kung matatandaan ninyo yung discussion natin last time, yung sa Atkinson and Shiffrin multi-store model of memory. Diba? Sensory store, then from the tons of information na register sa sensory store, meron lang tayong mga information na pinipili or binibigyan ng atensyon. So, yung mga pinili natin, yung binigyan natin ng atensyon na information, yung magpo-proceed sa short-term memory. But sa short-term memory, it is either i-manipulate mo yung information para mag-proceed or para ma-transfer sa long-term memory or maaari rin naman na siya lang magkaroon ka na ng output. Kung wala namang output, maaring walang mangyayari. Hindi na transfer sa long-term memory, wala kang output. So, yung information na na-keep or na-hold sa short-term memory ay, kumbaga, useless or wala lang na parang nag-stay lang siya sa'yo, nag-stay lang sa memory mo for a period of time or for um, sabihin natin na some seconds or minutes. And ayan. So to remember events and facts over a long period of time, we need to encode and subsequently transfer them from short-term to long-term memory. So we encode memories to store them. But do short-term and long-term storage use the same kind of code to store information? Or magkaiba ba yung code sa short-term storage and sa long-term storage? So when you encode information for temporary storage and use, what kind of code do you use? Then si Conrad, noong 1964, he set out an experiment. So yung mga participant, they were visually presented with several series of 6 letters at the rate of 0.75 seconds per letter. So try to imagine, halimbawa kayo yung mga participant. Then si Conrad, nag-present visually ng mga letter at the rate of 0.75 seconds. So wala pang sabihin natin na wala pa talagang isang segundo. Then, the letters used in various lists were B, C, F, M, N, P, S, T, V, and X. So, kung mapapansin ninyo, walang vowel or walang vowels na inilagay or present. It is because to ensure na walang mabubuong combination na madaling ma-pronounce. Kasi 'di ba, halimbawa, naglagay ng vowel dyan, letter A, sa pagitan ng B and C. So, para ang strategy kasi natin, para mas madaling matandaan, magka-come up tayo sa mga combination, like, yung B, halimbawa, may A dyan sa gitna ng B and C. So, iba pa naman sa atin yun as back. Mas madali para sa atin na ma-memorize yung information or yung mga letter. So, walang vowel na inilagay si Conrad para ma-assure or ma-ensure na the letters combination will not result in any words or pronounceable combinations na immediately after the letters were presented, participants were asked to write down each list of 6 letters in the order given. So what kind of errors did participants make? So despite the fact that letters were presented visually, errors tended to be based on acoustic confusability. So in other words, instead of recalling the letters they were supposed to recall, participants substituted letters that sounded like the correct letters. So they confused F for S, B for V, and P for B, and so on. So, yung mga participant, nagkaroon sila ng error based on acoustic confusability. So, ibig sabihin, sa tunog na napopronounce kapag binabanggit yung mga letter na yan. So, meron ding isang grupo ng participants, another group of participants simply listened to single letters in a setting that had noise in the background. So, yung unang set ng participant or unang group ng mga participant, paginisan sa kanila yung mga letter na nakikita ninyo, yung naka-bold, yung B, C, F, N, and so on, visually. So, halimbawa, sabihin nila lang natin na merong screen, then paginisan sa kanila yung mga letter or bawat letter at the rate of 0.75 seconds. So, yung another, wait lang, padaanin muna natin ito. So, yung another group of participants naman, pinakinggan lang nila. But, merong ingay sa paligid or maingay yung paligid. Then, they immediately reported each letter as they heard it. Participants showed the same pattern of confusability in the listening test as in the visual memory test. So, from the given experiment, ano kaya yung pwede maging conclusion? So, yung isa, present visually yung mga letter, and yung isa naman, pinakinggan lang. But, both group of participants ay nagpakita ng magkaparehas na pattern ng confusability. Ibig sabihin, we seem to encode visually presented letters by how they sound, not by how they look. So for short-term memory, tandaan sa short-term memory to, an acoustic code is more important than a visual code. So but the results do not rule out the possibility that other codes exist. So one such code would be a semantic code, or when we say semantic, katulad na sa module ninyo sa module 4, di ba, semantic processing, when we say semantic, nakabase sa kahulugan nung salita or nung information. So, noong 1996, merong isang researcher na he argued that short-term memory relies primarily on an acoustic rather than a semantic code. So, tandaan, short-term memory ito ah. So, according kay Badley, ang, ang short-term memory ay nagre-rely primarily sa acoustic code or sa sound na napoproduce kapag binabanggit yung information. So he gave his participants list of words to read and compared recall performance for list of acoustically confusable words such as map, cab, man, and cap, which with list of acoustically distinct words such as cow, pit, day, rig, and ban. So meron siyang binigay sa kanyang mga participant na list of words. Then he tried to compare it. Yung unang set ng mga salita ay they are or mako-consider ito na acoustically confusable words. So, ibig sabihin, kapag binanggit ng malakas itong mga salitang to, ay maaring magkaroon ng confusion. Kasi, halos or pare-parehas yung sound na napoproduce kapag pinopronounce ito. Katulad nga ng map, cab, man, and cap. Rather than itong isa, yung cow, pit, day, rig, and ban, so they are distinct from each other or kumbaga hindi sila magkakatunog or wala silang similarity even sa first or second letters. So he found that performance was much worse for the visual presentation of acoustically similar words. So this indicating that the acoustic code plays a significant role in encoding. So to put it simply, itong si Bagley, he discovered that the visual presentation of acoustically related terms performed significantly worse. So, ano ini-imply nun? It implies that the acoustic code plays an important role in encoding. Kapag magkatunog or kapag magkakatunog yung information, mas mahirap itong i-encode. So, encoding in short-term memory appears to be primarily acoustic, but there may be some secondary semantic encoding as well. Wait lang. In addition, we sometimes temporarily encode information visually as well, but visual encoding appears to be even more fleeting, about 1.5 seconds. So we are more likely to forget visual information than acoustic information. Thus, initial encoding is primarily acoustic in nature, but other forms of encoding may be used under some circumstances. So, ganito. Yung visual encode, 'di ba sinabi nga kanina sa bandang unahan na even though nagre-rely primarily yung short-term storage sa acoustic code, hindi naman nawala or nawawala yung mga code like visual code and semantic code. Nandun pa rin, present pa rin yung visual code and semantic code. But when it comes to visual encoding or sa visual code, mabilis kasi itong mawala. It appears to be more fleeting. So, approximately 1.5 seconds lang yung tinatagal nito. Kaya, we are more likely to forget visual information than acoustic information. So, kung i-relate natin or i-apply natin to sa real life situation, halimbawa kapag kayo ay nagre-review, some of us, or yung ilan sa atin, or iba sa atin, mas prefer nilang mag-review or magbasa sa pamamagitan lamang ng pagbabasa doon sa material, gamit lamang ng mata, or hindi na pinopronounce orally. So, ganito yung tip. Meron kasi tayong tinatawag na dual coding theory, if I am not mistaken. So, para mas madali, or no, para mas makatulong sa inyo na ma-store yung information ng pangmatagalan, ganito yung gagawin ninyo pag nagbabasa. Una, basahin nyo muna yung material or yung information orally. Malakas. So, it doesn't matter kung naiintindihan ninyo yung binasa nyo. Basta, basahin nyo lang siya ng malakas. Pangalawa, basahin nyo ngayon yung material or yung information na yun sa pamamagitan lamang ng mata. Then, pangatlo, basahin nyo ngayon yung material or information na yun na iniintindi nyo na yung yung kahulugan ng bawat salita or yung thought nung binabasa ninyo. So, in that way, present yung visual encoding, present yung acoustic encoding. So, sa acoustic encoding, binasa nyo ng malakas. Yung information, binasa nyo orally. Then sa visual encoding naman, binasa nyo sa pamamagitan lamang ng inyong mga mata. Then, try to integrate the two. What I mean is, pasukan ngayon or gamitin ngayon rather, yung tinatawag na semantic encoding. So, sa semantic encoding, kumbaga, binibigyan na ng interpretation or meaning kung ano yung inyong binasa or kung ano yung material na inyong inaaral. So, initial encoding is primarily acoustic in nature, but other forms of encoding may be used under circumstances. So, yung visual encoding, on the other hand, it tends to be much more unstable. 1.5 seconds lang yung tinatagal niya. But, visual information is more likely to be forgotten than acoustic information. So, as a result, initial encoding is predominantly acoustic. Although, katulad nga na sinabi ko kanina, other types of encoding can be used in some cases or some circumstances. Kasi hindi naman mawawala yung tinatawag na visual code and semantic code. May I want to give an example. When you remember a telephone number from long ago, you are more likely to remember how it sounds when you say it yourself than to remember a visual image of the digits as written on a piece of paper. So, next, long-term storage. As mentioned, information stored temporarily in working memory is encoded primarily in acoustic form. So when we make errors in retrieving words from short-term memory, the errors tend to reflect confusions in sound. Ngayon, how is information encoded into a form that can be transferred into storage and available for subsequent retrieval? So, sa long-term storage, most of the information stored in long-term memory primarily is encoded semantically. Kaya nga sabi ko sa inyo kanina, after nyong basahin orally, yung material, basahin sa pamamagitan ng mata, then, ang susunod yung gagawin is intindihin kung ano yung binabasa ninyo. So, in that way, yung information or yung material na gusto nyo nyong aralin ay matatransfer sa long-term memory or sa long-term storage. Kasi sa long-term storage or sa long-term memory, ang requirement dyan is yung information ay ma-encode semantically. The information should be encoded by the meaning of words. So, encoding of information in long-term memory is not exclusively semantic. So, again, babalik tayo dun sa sinabi ko kanina, na even though nag-rely yung long-term storage primarily sa semantic code, hindi pa rin naman mawawala yung gamit ng visual code and acoustic code. So, meron din namang mga evidence for visual encoding. Then, meron siyang experiment na magpapatunay. So, this result suggested that participants were encoding visual as well as semantic information. So, in fact, research has shown people are able to store thousands of images. So, fMRI studies have found that the brain areas that are involved in encoding can be, but do not necessarily have to be, involved in retrieval. So, sinasabi, according sa fMRI, yung mga brain area na involved or nagpa-function during encoding process ay hindi naman, kumbaga, not necessarily involved pa rin sila when it comes sa retrieval. So, with respect to faces, the anterior medial prefrontal cortex and the right fusiform face area play an important role in encoding and retrieval. So, sa encoding and retrieval, with respect to faces, yung anterior medial prefrontal cortex and the fusiform face area ay meron silang role um, mula sa encoding hanggang sa proseso ng retrieval or ng retrieval of information. So, kung matatandaan ninyo yung fusiform face area or yung fusiform face gyrus, di ba sabi ko nga, during our discussion sa module 4, na exclusive lang yung fusiform face area sa facial recognition. So, sa ating ability to recognize faces. So, yun lang yung kanyang function. Kaya nga, di ba sinabi natin na faces are special. Na merong brain area, merong brain region na exclusively or especially sabihin natin na nag-exist para lang sa recognition of faces. Yun lang yung kanyang function. So, our ability to recognize faces sa actual or sa totoong buhay, sa real life situations, and yung ating ability to recognize faces, halimbawa sa ating pinapanood, sa ating binabasa, sa mga art, painting, drawing, and even imagine faces. So, yung fusiform face area or fusiform face gyrus, yung responsible doon. So, both encoding and retrieval of places activate the left parahippocampal place area. So, the left PPA is associated with encoding rather than retrieval. So, yung left parahippocampal place area, ito ay more on or sabihin natin na mas active when it comes to encoding rather than retrieval. So, in addition, medial temporal and prefrontal regions are related to memory processes in general. So, no matter what kind of stimulus is used. Then, acoustic information, in addition to semantic and visual information, can be encoded in long-term memory. Thus, the way we store information that we retain for long periods is usually quite flexible. So, those who seek to know the single correct way we encode information are seeking an answer to the wrong question. There is no correct way. So, ano yung ibig sabihin nung statement or nung passage na to? Ang sinasabi lang dyan, or sa madaling salita, the way we store information that we want to keep for a long time is normally flexible. So, meron tayong kanya-kanyang paraan kung paano natin i-store or i-keep yung information. And it is normal. It is normally flexible. If you are looking for the one and only right way to encode knowledge, therefore, you are asking the wrong question because there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Walang effective or walang pinaka-effective yun. Walang pinaka-effective na way or walang nag-iisang paraan para ma-encode mo yung knowledge or yung information na mag-work sa lahat ng pagkakataon. Kumbaga, it is flexible. Ito ay nakadepende sa sitwasyon, nakadepende sa pangyayari or sa mga circumstances. So, there is no correct way or there is no single correct way that we encode information to answer all of the questions or kumbaga walang iisang paraan or pinaka-the best na paraan para i-encode yung information. So, if you are seeking, sabihin natin na ina-assess mo alin ba sa visual encoding, sa acoustic encoding, and sa semantic encoding yung pinaka-the best sa kanilang lahat. Even though the semantic encoding seems to be the best among the three codes, still, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, ulit-ulitin ko, na hindi pa rin nawawala yung gamit nung dalawang codes na the way we store information, the way we keep information para ma-retain ito sa mas matagal or mas mahabang panahon or para mas, kumbaga, ma-store ito ng pangmatagalan sa ating memory. It involves several techniques or several ways. So, again, if you are looking for a single way or one and only way to encode rather the knowledge, then you are asking the wrong question. Walang code na nagbibigay ng kasagutan sa lahat ng katanungan. So, yun, parang ganun. And since it is already 9:56 in the morning and medyo mabibitin kasi kapag pinagpatuloy pa natin itong discussion sa mnemonic devices. Pero